interest subprime mortgages.
So did the Fed jack up interest?
I think the Federal Reserve, yeah, they increased the interest rates, and then people, and since there's such crazy long-term,
Well, it moved up the yield curve, right?
yeah, and it ended up increasing the monthly payments by
Yeah.
absurd
Well,
amounts.
that part I get, but I wasn't sure if the Feds jacked up the rates and that was the spark that caused the whole yield curve to move up, all interest rates to move up, and then the people with no income couldn't afford to pay their
I'm
money.
unclear on what caused the interest rate.
But anyway, back to the point, what about all this free money floating around? That's one of their major arguments. There's a lot of free money floating around because of the inequality. A few very, very rich people have all this money, they've already bought all their houses and all the cars that they can possibly deal with, and they've still got $1 billion left over. So they say, where am I going to put it? And they go, United States, collateralized debt obligations. Throw it into that. You got a huge supply of money that pushes down the price of money. Everybody's taking out mortgages to buy houses, and it jacks up the prices, and that led to the bubble bursting. How do you reply? I understand your reply on political instability. It's a kind of a causal thing. Right? Correlation is not causation. Got it. What about this one? Investment. Guys? Ethan, Iman, and Ashley?
Well, it's interesting because having all that extra money doesn't necessarily mean the fact that they have it isn't necessarily a bad thing. It's just that in this case, that they were stupid enough to put it in places where they shouldn't have. But in reality, it could have been used to benefit the economy. So, I mean,
Well, that's kind of an argument. Just because you have a lot of money doesn't mean you have to invest it in risky ventures.
So what's reasonable? Isn't it a reasonable expectation that rich people?
Like your argument is, I've got all this extra money, I'm going to throw it into risky ventures. Well, why didn't you throw it into not risky ventures?
Because people are greedy. Like, they don't want 1% return when inflation's 2.2.
So it's the greed that's the cause, not the fact that there's income inequality.
But they have, the income inequality is the reason they have so much money to invest in the first place.
Yeah, but think of, I mean, that money could easily be, you know, I don't know, building manufacturing plants in states to.
It could be, but it wasn't. And twice now, the two biggest recessions.
But there's
Because
rich
look,
people,
because
there are
it
rich
wasn't.
people who put money into Canada savings bonds. And there's rich
Yeah.
people who go gamble and put it in the stock market. The fact that you've got a whole bunch of extra money doesn't mean that you're going to take risky
If you
ventures.
just increase corporate taxes, that decreases profit and income disparity, but it increases incentives to invest in training, machines, technology, because you don't get taxed on reinvestment. When you reinvest in your own company, you don't get taxed on that. So if there's a high tax rate, you're not going to pay out profit to your CEOs. You're going to reinvest the money because you're not going to get taxed on it. So why wouldn't you just increase income tax on corporations, and that'll solve your problem of finding investment money?
Yeah. Okay, I'm going to give you
It
both.
seems like we're talking about wealth again instead of the gap between the wealth and inequality with the issue of the crisis. Because you were previously talking about whether we're investing, whether we're talking about the gap between the income or poverty and wealth. And I think we're straying away from the topic of inequality, like an actual gap.
Which is a question that I've actually learned from this debate, so thank you. This whole idea of inequality is okay, it's just unreasonable inequality. Gaps are okay, but big gaps are not okay, and then that raises the obvious question, where's the dividing line between gap and big gap? What's unreasonable inequality? And then your answer is, well, it's just spikes. But what happens if you had a huge gap without spikes?
Then we would just have economic crisis at the time.
Like what bothers me about all this is who's going to decide what's an unreasonable gap? Like the market's doing this without intervention, so who's going to superimpose their value judgment on what's an unreasonable gap? You know, do you want everybody making the same amount of money? Is it okay if the poor are 20% below the median and the rich are 20% above? Is that okay? Well, what about 30 below and 30 above? Like, how far does it go?
I think it would,
And so one last point, and this gap, and somebody mentioned about the corruption too, it seems like when you look at the African countries, there's a lot of corruption along with the gap. And so is that as a result of the gap, or is it just coincidence? Like you got a rich guy like, what's his name? Zimbabwe. What's his name? What's his name? Mugabe. I mean, he started off okay, right? He was like a freedom fighter. He was like Castro in the gang. Like John A. MacDonald. But then, you know, power corrupts and absolute power corrupts absolutely, right? Once he gets all this money, all of a sudden, well, it's like Jenny Kwan in the news last night, right? She and her husband are working for some charity, and all of a sudden you find out she's spending $35,000 going on trips to Disneyland with money from the charity. I mean, it never ceases to amaze me. Power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. Once you get that power, you don't want to lose it.
So
So,
then inequality creates corruption.
yeah, I don't know which way it goes.
What if you just said that?
Then
Then if you have all that money, then that's when the corruption comes, that's when the political destabilization comes, that's
yeah,
when,
like Colombia and Mexico and the
and then
cartel.
it just all sorts of things.
Okay, so I'll be quiet. I'm going to give you guys 2 minutes to win your argument. Then you guys are going to get 2 minutes to win your argument. It's going to be difficult to win the argument because I don't think we can decide, but it's a really exciting question. Go for it.
Okay, so we can start right back at the beginning. We see the two spikes. This is when income inequality, I guess, past that threshold when it was just too much. That caused risky investments. That caused all sorts of issues. This causes economic collapse. This causes crises. This is why. And crises obviously affect long-term growth. If you don't have a stable market, then you can't have reliable growth.
All right.
and touching on the second point would just be
Okay, sure.
political instability is often a result of interregional disparity, and political instability causes uncertainty, which decreases investment, and can often lead to economic and political collapse.
Okay. So we'll give you the last word of the day. You're special.
Okay. So I think like with the issue with inequality, we have to, it has so much to do with human nature and like the instinctive human behavior that we should look at it microscopically. So I was actually thinking that taking this debate as an example, in the end, this debate will give the winning side 4 extra points, I think. That's what it says on your flow chart. Like the
What does this have to do
winner.
with summarizing your argument?
No, it's an analogy.
It's a plea for money.
Yeah, where's the
But
this brought me off guard. Come on.
imagine the case if the winner were to be given 2 more marks, and the case if the winner were to be given 8 more marks. So in the latter scenario, the higher reward will definitely generate more incentive to win and thus more competition. But
And if I gave an extra 20 marks for the winner, it might create cheating and corruption.
But yeah, the thing is, it's only, yeah, the thing is,
a 4th person.
so yeah, of course, it's still going to be a collaborative effort between us, but unfortunately, this rise in competition and inequality in scoring distribution will have negative consequences such as stress or even crimes such as underhanded tactics, backstabbing, little secrets and
Making
stuff.
sure that the
But-
projector doesn't work.
Yeah,
Yeah.
maybe. But on the other hand, it will also encourage much more positive efforts from both sides. because both sides will want to win, which will most likely result in a debate of higher quality, more stimulating debate.
Yeah.
So yes, the scores will be.
Individual ambition serves the common.
Yeah, exactly. So even though the scores will be unequal between two sides, but ultimately, as a group, our overall score may potentially be higher. So, but more importantly, our well, which in this case I think is our critical understanding of this debate topic, will have been stimulated and been enhanced to a higher level. And but for many reasons that are specific to this course, the reward for winning is not 8, it's not 2, but it's 4 for specific reasons. But obviously a national economy is much more complex than the gaming situation we have here. So the underlying human perception in response to things such as self-worth, reward, and competition are the same. And this human nature, as shown throughout history, always has its own way of self-generating inequality and simultaneously benefiting from it in some way. So I think we should stop counteracting our human instincts by calling inequality a culprit to many of our social problems. So I guess in the end we argue that much like the reward for winning this debate is set at a level of 4 marks with critical and dynamic analysis of countries and economies with different specific situations. Income inequalities at an unextreme but nevertheless existent and perceivable level can be healthy for the economy in the long run.
Got it.
And that is just talking about from the human nature.
Okay, thanks. My comments, first of all,